We're getting pretty darn close out here south of the farm to turning some dirt. I can almost taste it. One of my favorite methods to determine how far off the soil is from being fit to plant is what I like to call the shovel test. I walk out into the wettest area of the field because it will be the most problematic. I then proceed to grab a bite of dirt with said shovel, and if it looks dry on the top 3 inches, it's probably ready to plant. If I walk out of the field with my boots muddy, it's probably not ready to plant. Of course, I pull up a root ball. It's getting there. Then if you want a little more information, grab the soil, run it between your fingers, see what it does. We are getting a few little small balls, which means there's a little bit of residual moisture that might cause some issues. Due to the tremendous amount of vegetative matter from the last corn crop, fields that were corn going into soybeans are typically going to be your wettest fields compared to standing soybean stubble that will be going into corn. So we'll check one of those out. It's like a nice and weedy spot in the field that I do know also tends to be a little bit wet, so we'll check this one out. Much darker soil, although much drier in the top couple inches. Still coming up cloddy. I'd say this might need a day or two as well. I don't know, field cultivator might crumble that up. Wow, the ground might be close, the sun might be shining, but this breeze and cold weather is brutal out here. Not very motivating to be planting. I've been walking for 5 minutes and I can't even feel my fingertips. Not exactly what I'd like to see to put corn or soybeans in the ground, but when it's April on the calendar, if the ground's fit, you just gotta go. Piece by piece, this old barn is slowly fading away into history. Getting more holes in the roof, eventually it's just gonna go. Sad to see, really an icon of an era of farming that's long since passed. That's back when all of these parcels were divided up and farmed by multiple families to survive and make a living off of and just feed themselves. Now we farm it all, which is just kind of the way modern agriculture has gone. The tillage is going to be on the list for the day, but seeing as it's so cold, not perfectly dry, we got a few other things to overcome first. Mainly working on a soybean bin. Back over west, we've emptied 3 bins here of corn, working on 3 tiny bins of beans, about 33 or 3,400 bushel apiece. One of the back roller bearings on the conveyor went out last night. It's really not that old or seen that much use, but it spent a lot of this winter sitting in puddles of water and running in water, which I would imagine is not that great for longevity of that hardware. Dad ran up to Arthur Repair Shop where we bought this backhoe conveyor, grabbed a bearing, put it on this morning, and we're back in action. We've got the gravity portion of today's lesson done. Now we'll close the door, pull a little bit out of the center sump, which is extremely slow. Then we'll have to bring in the sweep auger next load. So we'll have to move the auger over a little bit. Old trees, they're a blessing and a curse at the same time. They're pretty to look at until they fall over on one of your bins, or when they cause dimensional issues of getting your truck in close enough proximity to the conveyor. So Dad's trying to adjust the spout. We're going to tighten it down. It gained us maybe a foot or two. Then when we move over to the next bin, we'll have to go all the way out and pull the conveyor in this way to make it work. Might back the truck in. I don't know. We kind of fly by the seat of our pants on these bins. It takes us about 90 minutes to load them in the fall. 3,400 bushels, not that much for a modern combine fleet. My father and I have very different tool organization systems. I cram them all into my back seat. He puts them all in his door jamb. Can't ever complain about having old crops still in the bins unsold, because cash beans hit, I believe, $16.80 or something yesterday. Corn, $8. Haven't seen numbers like that since 2012. Great for farm profitability, especially last year, but as I hit on again and again, input prices for the next season, we're locked in for 2022 at good prices, but 2023 is going to be expensive. No one can get around that. Getting the big girl out. Time to test out the welds on the field cultivator. She's a beast. Single Welding stopped by on Saturday, so about 3 days ago. Put 1 or 2 welds on that field cultivator, and then this field cultivator, which the 620 is going to be on, it had like 7 or 8. I wasn't here. Dad said he did a pretty good job grinding them all down. Beefed them up. We caught it in the preliminary stages, so a crack's not that big of a deal. It's when the frame actually starts to pull apart that you have issues. He didn't have to cinch anything down. We were just trying to stay on top of any potential issues, and if anything's gonna break, it'll be after we hook this tractor up to it and put it to the test. Here's one of his welds right here. We need to top them all off with some green spray paint, but they look good. I couldn't have done that. Trying not to get ahead of myself, but I can't help but be excited to watch this 620 pull that field cultivator. Whether or not it's pulled in two, not really concerned about right now. Having some unfolding problems right now. It's trying. Ah. No power like manpower. Preliminary analysis, still a tad bit wet. Field cultivator needs to go deeper in the ground, and we've already dug up a rock. Fantastic. It's making a dust out there. You okay? I think that one's a goner, folks. Leave it be. Regardless as to whether or not we plant, at the very least, this is gonna get the neighbors stirring a little bit. This is actually working up pretty good out here in the nicer, well-drained ground. Onion bed, if I've ever seen one. Wow, that looks good. Just take it all in, can that up, make it a candle, and make a lot of money. Freshly turned dirt. It's like a pair of men's underwear out in the middle of the field. Been out here for a few years. I'm not sure where you draw the line, but if you see a pair of underwear out in the middle of a field, you just don't ask questions. Who knows how they got there, why they're there. I like to think it just blew away from maybe a trash pile. but could have been some very desperate times out here for someone stranded without toilet paper. To the uneducated, it would look like he's just working around this field like a chicken with his head cut off. However, he's actually accomplishing something, working in all of these washes from that big rain we had. You get 3.5 or 4 inches of water coming off of our farm site. Get some angle, grade, volume, speed. It's gonna cut its way wherever it wants to go. And it presents a very big hurdle for us working, planting, and spraying. In my mind, the answer is pretty simple, but we're looking at $1 million question here. With this henbit growing, warm weather in the forecast, and no guarantee that we're gonna be able to plant anytime soon, we either work this henbit, chickweed, kill it off, make sure it stops growing, or we need to pull the trigger, bring out our silver bullet and spray our Acuron. We're one passers, we'd come, we'd spray it. It consists of atrazine, Callisto, Dole, and bicyclopyrone. That's a 4-way mix of herbicide chemicals, 1 group 5, 2 group 27s, and 1 group 15. The latter that I named, the bicyclopyrone, is a group 27 HPBD inhibitor. It is the premium part of that blend, and what makes them so proud of the product. They charge quite a bit for it, but it works extremely well. If we were to come out here and spray it now, it would kill all this off. It'd give us some residual for quite a while, probably a month to 6 weeks. However, we'd be playing our hand very early in the season without a crop in the ground. Regardless, we do need to make a decision, because if it's dry enough to work, it is dry enough to spray. So we either spray it or we work it. I guess we'll just see how the cards fall. And by that I mean what the boss says. Looked like it worked up pretty good.
Wet.
Not that wet.
I'm not going that deep though.
That's true. What'd you break? Well, that didn't last long.
Yeah, I think I just want to get a bigger field over there.
Was it just playing with it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but you weren't that deep in the ground either. Still worked up pretty good. I guess if you went another inch deeper, it'd probably be
mud balls. My purpose was to get that so they can spray it.
Only took about 15 minutes with the 600 horsepower tractor to figure out anything that could possibly be wrong with the field cultivator. Although Dad believes that this was already broken quite a bit based on the rust, and the little bit of tillage broke it the rest of the way. We're out of line tractor. This U-bolt right here should be the fix. We got a spare. Dad's got the other one. I got to fold and unfold the tractor to get the bar where we need it to reattach it. As you can see, when I fold and unfold it, that bar over there, right there, that's broken, loosens up a little bit, which will let us kind of play with it. Takes the weight off of the wheels. If you don't wait for it to fold over like that, it'll jam both sides together, then you got a real mess on your hands. We are about a half mile to the south. Small distance, completely different soil profile, lighter, sandier dirt. It's gonna be a lot drier, I can imagine. We're not gonna find out right now though, we got other things to do. During all that process of fixing that, I got a good field report from Dad. The field cultivator was really not that deep in the ground. He's afraid that if we went to a working depth of 3 inches where we normally are, we'd be pulling up mud balls. Pull up mud balls is not great. That's where the corn is gonna be anyways. You plant into very wet soils, your roots will probably have compaction to get through, and if you don't get the timely rains you need, it will cause big issues, stand problems, and ultimately yield loss. So we're gonna pull away from that. Nutrients out here right now, applying some Acuron. Can't beat their service. They're always quick to get up here. Let's watch them spray. Nutrien made pretty quick work out of spraying those fields. In reality, we didn't spray our entire farm, just a couple hundred acres that were getting a little overgrown with weeds. I know that putting it on ahead of time is not necessarily the most optimal thing to do with your herbicide, but Acuron is an extremely strong product, and on the very, very, very slim chance that we get some weeds breaking through later in the season, Syngenta will warranty that product. They'll come back out here with another dose of Callisto and kill everything out there except for the corn. The major downside to these bins being so small is that you get in them pretty quickly. We just opened this one up this morning and sweep auger's already in. If there's anywhere you need a mask, it's in a soybean bin. Glad to have this on, although it was a little bit warmer than I thought it was going to be. And I did a lot more scooping than I intended on. Our sweep auger was working intermittently. That's the last thing we need, is for our sweep augers to unionize, take a break every 15 minutes. That's a lot of work for me. Like a well-oiled machine, albeit a feisty machine that's pretty good at complaining, but a machine nonetheless. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back in action. Dad worked a few passes around the field while I was taking a quick lunch break. We're gonna work this. Turn the battery switch the wrong way. While the tractor gets the blood flowing a little bit, I'm gonna walk around the field cultivator, make sure nothing else is broken in the last 15 minutes since we fixed the first problem. Appears good so far. This field is a completely different soil type than where we just came from. It's sandier subsoil, almost a gravel, so it's going to dry very quickly. Typically it's the first field we plant, so if any of our fields are going to go today, it'd be this one. We're going to work the whole thing. This has had some time to air out, but you can see powdering up really good. Nice and fine, not too wet. Get down, not even wet, 4 inches down, so good shape. I think we're good to go. Auto track on, put her in gear. Let her eat. I've made it one through and nothing's fallen apart yet. Working up pretty nicely. I was wondering why I was getting so toasty, and then I realized Dad had the heated seat on. Not the time of the year to need that. Running smoothly so far. Awfully tempting to call the planet over here because it's working up great. That tile hole's starting to get some size to it. Almost big enough to have a personality of its own. I was having a little too much fun on the tractor cab, so I figured I ought to get out and do a little inspection because I've been covering quite a bit of ground. Running the field cultivator is one of my favorite jobs just for the fact that you get so much ground covered. Of course, I don't get to run the field cultivator other than early spring like this. Working up pretty good. Field cultivator looks good. Hasn't fallen apart yet. Fingers crossed. I need to start carrying a bunch of big flags so I can mark those. Not that anyone would really miss that if they drove by it. Not really an issue around planting time. That could cause some issues in harvest time if someone's not paying enough attention. It's pretty easy not to see a tile hole when it's surrounded by 7-foot tall corn. Inevitably, someone's gonna ask, what are these white huts across the field? Listen up so you don't put a comment down below asking what they are. Those are water wells. In some strange way, it's actually inconvenient because I get down and back so fast, I have to put the camera down. These are water wells owned by the city of Mattoon initially. They drilled them decades ago to provide water to Mattoon. They ended up building their own massive treatment plant off of Lake Paradise. Now Clearwater leases them from the city of Mattoon and provide water as a cooperative to people in the area in the countryside. If we had public water, it would be Clearwater. It is kind of ironic because those are the water lines we hit when we were laying that big tile. It was a Clearwater line. So that water initially came from our farm. We own the field, they lease it from us, a long-term lease, and we have to be careful. There's a few products we cannot apply chemical-wise around it because they don't want it leaching down into the wells. And so we manage this farm a tiny bit differently, although the requirements are really not that much more different than what we normally do. Just a big emphasis on no atrazine. Big old pile of soybean stubble here in the corner that I'm trying to eat away one chunk at a time. Like eating an elephant. You gotta do it one nibble at a time. Where's it taking me? Does it even know where it's taking me? I don't think it does. Just giving each end row one more comb over and we finish this field. Practically an onion bed, if I say so myself. You can plant a garden out here. This may be the only soybean stubble I work today. Next on the agenda is looking at some of these corn stalks out here, especially where the water washed them. I'm gonna hop across the lane here, work it right on top, scratch it, not as deep as I'm doing here. See if it's dry enough to do that, and if it is, I'm going to go out there and level some of the inrows and some of the draws through the field. I get real tired of people leaving stuff in the way all the time. Who would do something like this? Now, I'm not going to pretend I didn't have my foot on the clutch the whole time just in case. It's definitely working up a little heavier in spots, but corn stalks are never going to look as good as soybean stubble. There's just a lot more root mass from the previous crop, creating soil structure that doesn't really exist where soybeans were. Not to mention, we're also looking at two completely different farms in terms of soil profile. Only a stone's throw away. This one, a lot sandier underneath, drains very well, but lighter on top. This farm has a lot more diversity to it, a lot of very rich, dark soil, especially as we get to the southwest corner where we started. Out across the middle, we've got a hill that gets water off. All things considered, this farm is going to be a lot wetter in many spots. It's a lot more productive in terms of the crop output. This is a fairly large field. The majority of it does not need work. We hit it with the vertical till, which is a very low intensive tillage method. Leaves a relatively flat area up top. A couple parts we hit with the disc ripper was rough, needs field cultivated, and the washes. So we're gonna hop in here, till a bunch of that up. Hopefully it comes good. Maybe think about planting it tomorrow. One thing's for certain, it's plenty dusty out here. Not too satisfied with a few areas in the field, so probably gonna hold off from planting. Working our way to the exit, folding up, hopping across the road, doing the same thing over there, cleaning up a mess. Everyone pay attention, make sure nothing's dangling off or unattached. Without fail, it seems like every time you unfold this thing, the drag chain harrows get caught up on the shanks ahead of them. So you have to get out and readjust them with force. And I managed to pinch my finger, so gloves are on. Something's out of whack here. No. 2 for 2. Our fields are getting overrun by some sort of grass. We're gonna have a yard out here if we don't get planted before too long. Noticed something on one of the wing tires that didn't look right. I'm gonna check it out. Doesn't look like anything's wrong with it, just not as dirty as it should be. And that's alarming. Good to go. Here's our grass or weed or whatever this is, all over the field. These fields are just getting so bad already. This is not one that we sprayed, but we either need to work these or spray them, because if not, these are going to get out of hand. It's an interesting predicament to be in, especially compared to last year where it was a picture-perfect planting season. It almost looks like this was planted right here. I don't know if this is the combine cutting path. I have no idea where this stuff came from. The decision has been made. We are working this field tonight. We need to kill these weeds. Other than the fairly large weedy patches, this field's actually working up pretty good. It's another lighter soil farm. Typically enjoys a nice cultivation before planting. I know what a lot of you are probably thinking right now. These fields are working up relatively decent, or at least the soybean stubble going into corn. So why do we not have the corn planter out right now, putting seeds in the ground? It's tough to give you a great answer for that. To put it this way, there's no simple playbook for farming. Every year is so different, and the right decision for that year really will not be known until harvest time, because you will not have the yield data until the combine goes through the field. To boil down our management predicament into layman's terms, we are trying to hit a moving target while roller skating on ice in the wind. That's exactly what's going on right now. So we look at the forecast because it's incredibly important what the 10-day is after we plant corn. It's extremely sensitive. We really have one shot to hit a grand slam. If we mess it up the first time, our chances of having an extremely successful crop are much, much lower. The three most important things to consider when planting your crop are soil moisture, moisture in the forecast, and temperature in the forecast. The combinations of those three things can make or break your crop. It can be the difference between 250 bushel corn and 150 bushel corn if you don't pick the right time to plant. 10-day forecast average among three different prominent models they use to predict the weather is about 1.5 inches on the 10-day forecast, with all three of those models calling for us getting a half-inch drink or so tomorrow around midday. That amount of rainfall is in close proximity to putting our seeds in the ground. If we went out and planted tomorrow morning and it didn't rain, that'd be perfect in the short term. If we went out and then we got a little rain, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal. But then when you account for a very cool forecast after this weekend into next week, our corn crop's going to be sitting in the ground struggling to get much metabolism going. Now, there's always the chance of a heavy rainfall after we plant, packing down our soils, causing some major emergence issues, and on top of that, the cool forecast later on will be the perfect recipe for disease. The level of uncertainty involved right there with what I just described to you is the biggest issue we're presented with. We do not know what's going to happen. The only thing that we can really fall back and rely on is our knowledge and familiarity with our farms here, that we have decades of experience combined, probably a century of experience combined between all the family members working here, and knowing what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what we should definitely not do again. Planting ahead of a rain followed by a cool off, even if it's a couple days away, typically is not the best recipe for a perfect corn stand. However, on the opposite side of the coin, we do know that statistically speaking, the best time to plant your corn is April. Now, you can have good corn in late March, you can have good corn in May, and maybe even June, but 9 years out of 10, mid-April, where we are right now, is the place to plant. Although corn plants are extremely efficient when it comes to late season growth, photosynthetic efficiency, and grain yields, they're not very good or very vigorous at the early part of the season. Bad weather can really dampen them and slow them down. Soybeans, though, are the complete opposite. You can almost throw them on top of the ground, and as long as they get a couple rains to integrate into the soil and germinate and get their roots down, they can be pretty successful. I've planted some soybeans in very marginal conditions that were followed by even more marginal conditions, and they still yielded pretty tremendously. To put it simply, they can just withstand a beating from Mother Nature and still produce. Most of that success, though, is owed to modern seed treatments to help prevent and fight against disease, which are really the biggest yield robber and killer of small soybean seedlings. It seems to me that as long as those soybeans are treated, they can lay in the ground for a month. They'll come up eventually when it warms up, and as long as it doesn't freeze and kill them, they should be fine. Even if all that information is mostly useless to all of you, it will kind of give you a perspective of what's going through my head and how we're managing our farm right now. If I'm leaning towards anything, bright and early tomorrow, I might go out and see if one of those fields is dry enough to plant some soybeans. Very hesitant to plant corn, although a good night's rest might change my mind. Despite all of that, this field needed worked. It was getting weedy. We either spray it or work it. We'd like to work it if it's dry enough. We had to spray those fields because they were too wet. We only get one shot to spray our Acuron. It's good regardless of where we use it, but you hedge your bet a lot better if you push that application as far back as possible. That's all I got left in this field. But I might hop over there and try working some corn stalks. I literally have zero idea what's going on. still a field cultivator. I feel like I'm on a wild goose chase right now. I feel like I get one area of corn stalks cleaned up and then I peek a little bit off in the distance and I find another one and I'm off to do that one and then I find another one. Really no strategy to what's going on here other than just trying to get the corn stalks. Ugh, what a day of farming. At this point I feel like I'm just going in circles and I'm out of water and have been for a couple hours. So I think I'm gonna call it quits. If I could see a little bit better to work these stalks down, I'd probably run a little bit longer. In all reality, we should have probably had both field cultivators out today just working all this ground, but that's not what we did. Here's that we made it through the day unscathed, other than that bracket this morning. You can't really ask for much more than that. Got a decent chunk of groundwork today, about 1,000,000 times more than I was expecting to work when I showed up. We're ending where we started the video off because I was just a couple 100 feet away with my shovel digging up to check the soil. We're just gonna have to wait and see what Mother Nature brings us. I might try and plant tomorrow morning, although I don't know. Regardless, it is quitting time and I think that's more than enough farming for one video. I appreciate you all tuning in. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace!